Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. Lincoln Property Company is presenting a proposal at the 4600 North Marine Drive. To start this meeting, Kylie from my office will go over the technology and how our question and answer session will work. Lakeside Area Neighbors Association will give a brief overview of their boundaries and feedback process, and then we'll jump right into the presentation. After the presentation, we'll go right to questions. So Kylie, take it away.
Thank you, Alderman Cappleman. Hello, everyone. So just a few housekeeping notes. As I said, this meeting is now being recorded. If you prefer to have your video off, there is a stop video button in the bottom left corner of the screen. When you were all admitted, you were automatically muted. We ask that you stay muted to avoid background noise during the presentations. And then just so you know, the chat will be off during the presentations from our speakers, but after the presentations, we will move into a question and answer session. 4 questions, just so that we can keep it moving. The chat will be turned on, and I will ask the questions for the presenters in the order that they are submitted. And just so that we have a chance to hear from everyone, we ask that because we're reading them in order, if you have multiple questions, to please prioritize your first one, and then we'll loop back around just to make sure we have a chance to hear from everyone. And so with that, I will pass it on to Lakeside Area Neighbors if you want to share your screen.
Great, thanks, Kylie. My name is Marianne Lalonde, and I'm the president of the Lakeside Area Neighbors Association. This is the first meeting for some of the folks on the call, so I wanted to give a brief overview to our boundaries and our organization. We're one of now 16 block clubs in the 46th Ward. Our boundaries go from Lawrence to Wilson and from Sheridan to Clarendon. And our mission is to ensure our community remains safe, inclusive, and welcoming to all who work, live, and play in our area. So we ask that for those on the call who don't live in our boundaries, you're welcome to stay and listen. We want to be as inclusive as possible, but please defer to people that live in the boundaries for questions and feedback during this particular meeting. If you do live outside the boundaries and you want to provide feedback, you can do that through your own block club. And I have a map of the block clubs on the next slide. You can find this map on the Alderman's website. This will show you who your, what block club that you live in, the boundaries, and your block club has a vote on the 46th Ward Zoning and Development Committee, which is the next stage of this process. So I encourage you to get involved in your own block club if you live in another part of the ward. And if you need help reaching out and finding out who is the leadership of your block club, I'm happy to personally do that for you. The process in our community for voting on developments is as follows. First, typically there's a very large community meeting. This isn't happening right now because of COVID. Then there's a meeting between the developer and the block club. That's what we're doing today. We've asked the developer to come back for a second meeting so we can accumulate feedback and questions from people in the meantime. So we will have another meeting with the developer before it goes to the 46th Ward Zoning and Development Committee, and then to City Council, should the Zoning and Development Committee vote to advance the development. The way that we are going to collect feedback is a little bit different than we normally would. Normally we use our Google Groups listserv to pass around a Google form, and we also vote live at a block club meeting. Because of COVID, we are adding another way to provide feedback, which would be dropping an index card in a pre-made box. Our member David Baumgartner has constructed some boxes for us. We ask that you write your name, address, and cross streets, and any questions or feedback you have for the developer. These boxes will be available starting this weekend at least 4 locations in our block club boundaries. The index cards will be provided, but you're welcome to bring your own paper if you want to write it in advance and just drop it in the box. There will be a box for feedback drop-off at Uptown Deli, at Sheridan and Lawrence, and the building 920 Lakeside, the building 850 Eastwood, and Japusa on Wilson Avenue. So that's 920 Wilson. And you can just drop it in the lobby of any of those buildings or at Uptown Deli. I know this can be a lot to take in for people who are participating in this process for the first time. So just a couple of FAQ. If you have a problem with the zoning and development feedback process, this is something that the Alderman's office created, so please just contact the Alderman's office if you have a process question on the overarching process. If you're worried about our personal block club voting process and you live within our boundaries, or you want to drop off box in your building, say we don't have one there yet, or you want other accommodations to make this process easier for you, you can reach out to lakesideneighbors46@gmail.com. That's also the way to sign up for our Google Groups listserv, which is our primary way to communicate with each other. And if you are overwhelmed by what you learned today and you want to understand it better, or you just want to talk after this meeting, we do want to keep this meeting short. We understand that some of our members don't have consistent access to Wi-Fi. So we're going to try to keep it to 90 minutes, but I will open our LANA Zoom room after that, and I'll drop the link in the chat box if anyone wants to have open discussion after the meeting or wants to visit with us. And the last thing is thank you so much for coming. Again, please give question priority to those within LANA boundaries. Be respectful of our time limits. We don't want to go over 90 minutes today, and stay involved with LANA. There's a lot of exciting opportunities leadership within our organization, and normally we do a lot of fun stuff. This is a picture of our barbecue 2 years ago, social events in addition to making development decisions, park cleanups, and we're eager to get back to all of our regular scheduled business as soon as it is safe to do so. So thank you very much, Kylie. I see there's something in the chat. Okay, there's your board number. I will hand the screen back over to you and to Mr. Weber.
Thank you. And so Bob, if you want to click the share screen button, you are good to go.
Sure. Can you see our cover sheet?
Yes, perfect. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Bob, do you want me to take it from here?
Yeah, Joe, go ahead.
Okay. My name is Joe Segoviano, and if there's any technical difficulties, let me know. I'm hoping you can hear me. I'm with Lincoln Property Company, and first we'd like to thank LANA and the Alderman's office for hosting this evening. This is certainly an interesting new world, but it's great that we're all able to keep moving forward and communicate given the difficulties. So Lincoln Property Company, we are a national residential developer and owner of apartment units, and we are the contract purchaser on a piece of property that's located at Wilson and Marine Drive in Uptown. The property is currently owned by the Weiss Hospital, and so we will be seeking approval for a 314 unit building on this location. And we will be doing that through an application to the Department of Planning, which will be seeking an amendment to the existing PD, which currently governs the PD for the hospital. So this evening, what we wanted to do in respect to keeping the time limited, we're going to try to do this in about 10 to 15 minutes. We'll go through the plans, and we'll also have a few comments from the hospital as well. So with that, for 30 seconds, kind of just some very brief background on Lincoln Property Company. We are a 55-year-old national developer. We are vertically integrated. So what that means is we seek our opportunities, we entitle, we finance, we develop, and we own and operate all of our communities. We are currently in 24 communities and about 7,400 units in the city of Chicago. In addition to that, total, we have about 39 communities and 11,000 units in the Chicagoland area. We have been in the Chicago market for nearly 30 years. A couple of projects more recently is Aurelian at 833 North Clark, 1401 State, and I bring that up purposely because we did that with our architects on this project, Valario, DeWalt, and Train, and then we just completed a 12-story building in Oak Park. We are attracted to Uptown for a lot of the reasons that I'm sure most of you are. The diversity of the people and the architecture, the rich culture and entertainment, access to the lakefront, and the availability of services, especially as it pertains to public transportation. The plans you'll see tonight, they've all been reviewed with the Alderman's office, with the Department of Planning, and with the Department of Housing. And we do realize as we go through this that we will need to complete a traffic study. We'll also be completing a shadow study as part of the process. As for the affordable or the ARO, we met with the alderman early on in this process, and at that time, he suggested that we consider contributing to a Sarah Circle project. We got to know Sarah Circle a little bit. So at this time, we are proposing to meet the requirements of the ARO with 8 units that would be within our building, so 8 affordable units within our building. And in addition to that, a contribution of approximately $3.1 million to the Sarah Circle project so that those funds stay within the ward. So with that, let me introduce everyone who's with us tonight, then I'll hand it off to our architect. So with Lincoln Property is myself and Matt Hirschberger. With DLA Piper, our attorneys is Paul Shado and Katie Del Jenke. With Valario DeWalton Train is Joe Valario and Bob Weber. And then also joining us this evening from the hospital is Pat Schultz, Mary Sheehan, Terry Toohey, and Irene Dubanis. So with that, I will hand it over to Joe and to Bob to walk you through the plans.
Good evening. Really happy to be here. This is Joe Valario, founding principal of Valario DeWalton Train. A little background on our firm and myself. I grew up in Rogers Park, lifelong Chicagoan, although I made some stops in some other cities. Our firm is 25 years old. Our relationship with Lincoln Properties goes back at least a dozen years, if not longer. Our firm is actively involved in a number of projects, including the mayor's initiative to invest in underserved neighborhoods, and also the exciting Reinventing Cities competition for a site in the Loop. We're one of the shortlisted firms for that. As I said, we've had a long relationship with Lincoln, and we've worked very closely with them on the development and design. I'd like to brief you on that right now, and I will obviously be available to answer your questions as we move through the evening. So Bob, next. Oh, okay. So this is the site. It's between Marine Drive and Clarendon and just north of Wilson. It's an existing parking lot that's underutilized. The hospital recently built a large parking structure which more than satisfies all their parking needs. And so this was the focus of our design. Next. This is a look at the layout of the first floor. The main entrance to the building will face Marine Drive at that corner. There's a large lobby space that includes a number of amenities, including a very large 2,000 square foot bike room, which extends along the elevation along Wilson, and a variety of other uses important to the residents that face Marine Drive. The parking structure, which includes 136 parking spaces, is accessed off of Clarendon. The reason for that is to make sure that in no way our parking residents would interfere with ambulance access to the hospital. There's a service drive that's on the hospital's property, or will remain on their property, which runs along the north edge of our building. There is access along that drive for our loading dock, which is compliant with all the rules and regulations of the city at about the midpoint in the building. We also, as part of the requirements of this site, there's a 20-foot setback from Marine Drive, which will be part of the landscape strip that creates a very wide green space between the curb on Marine Drive and both our future building and the existing hospital. Our typical residential floor includes 6 two-bedroom apartments, a number of one-beds and studios. And overall, we have 314 apartments, 88 efficiency or studio apartments, 168 one-bedrooms, and 58 two-bedroom apartments. I should emphasize These are not micro apartments. These are traditional market style apartments in terms of size and amenities. And we think it's important that this building will be different from some of the other product that's been built recently in your neighborhood. Going on. These two drawings show the elevations of our building. First, there's a north-south section basically through Marine Drive. Our building is in the center left with the rather large development that's kitty corner across from our property, which is the 4550 Clarendon Drive building. You can see the hospital because the height of each floor is a hospital height, which is significantly more than a residential building. The adjacent hospital is almost the height of our building. And then the lower section is a section through Wilson looking north. Our building is on the right. The building in the middle is the apartment building, which is actually built by the hospital years ago on the other corner of Clarendon and Wilson, and then another building which can be seen in the distance. Going on. So our materials will include brick, metal panel, a good deal of ground floor glazing, and then our glass will be a low reflective glass, which is designed to limit the impact on birds of our building, along with some other strategies that if you're curious, I can fill you in on that. Going on. So these are a couple of photographs of the existing intersection of Wilson and Marine Drive. The hospital is obviously in the image on the right. If we go on, we've got a series of renderings of the building when it will be completed. So this is the view from that intersection with our glassy lobby facing Marine Drive, an entry portal. You can see the hospital in the distance, and you can look down Wilson at the adjacent buildings. So this is a close-up of our entry facing Marine Drive, and we think it'll be a landmark on that corner. And there's a real emphasis in our design on people who use public transportation. There's an important bus stop on Marine Drive right opposite our entry door. And again, we anticipate a lot of bicycle use. And so we've developed a very large bicycle storage and repair station. Next, this is a view looking at the face of our building along Wilson. You notice the staircase, which is glass enclosed and serves to sort of visually animate the building. And that's really part of our whole concern for wellness. It's been shown that daylit stairs are used by residents or workers 30% more, 30 times more than a completely enclosed fire stair. We have this exposed stair and then another one at the corner of Wilson and Clarendon. You can see the bike room, the glassy enclosed bike room, which is right adjacent to the stair that faces out onto Wilson Drive. Next. An overhead view, which shows our building in context. As you can see, there are a number of other buildings that are equal in height, and some that are even significantly higher in the adjacent areas. So then this is a photograph of the corner of Clarendon and Wilson. And if we go to the next image, you see the wing of the building that anchors Clarendon. The building is U-shaped, creating an elevated sunlit terrace for the residents. As you can see at that corner the exposed stair that is similar to the exposed stair at the along Wilson near the Marine Drive intersection. Finally, this is looking at the side of the building that faces the hospital. This is the existing condition. You can see the 4550 buildings in the distance. And if we now go on, we can see what our building will look like. Our lobby is filled with active uses that faces the hospital, faces Marine Drive, and also faces Wilson. And you can see the relative height of our building versus the hospital, which is only slightly lower. And then an aerial view of that service drive with our service entrance just to the left of the hospital. Yeah, Bob, thank you for pointing with your cursor. And the ambulance entrance is off in the distance off of Clarendon.
I think we got one more.
Okay. So just to conclude, this is very early in our design process, but this is the period of time where we seek approval from the city to proceed with the development. The design will change and will evolve, and we're anxious to hear your thoughts and suggestions, and we'll consider all of these very seriously.
Joe, with that, I think we'd like to hand it over to the hospital folks. Not sure who's kicking it off, so the Weiss Hospital folks.
This is Pat Schultz. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being with us tonight. I'd like to introduce Irene Dumanis, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Weiss Hospital. Irene?
I was speaking on mute. I apologize. Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for inviting us to this meeting and giving us an opportunity to speak with all of you. So my name is Irene Dumanis, and I am the CEO of Weiss Memorial Hospital. Although I'm relatively new to the role, I think I've been in this role for about a month and a half now. I'm not new to Weiss. I've been with the hospital since May of 2019 as a Chief Financial Officer, and I am here tonight to ask for your support for your community hospital. I also wanted to introduce Mary Sheehan and Terry Tui, who are also here tonight representing Weiss, and who are well known to many of you throughout their work in the Uptown community. First, I would like to say that Weiss is here to stay as your provider of medical services to the community. There's absolutely no plans to close Weiss Hospital. Quite to the contrary, I wanted to give you some idea of the investments that we have made into the facilities and into some of the programs that we have grown so far and continue to grow over the next couple of years. I think some of you know, we had mentioned before that we just went through the system conversion and implemented the state-of-the-art electronic medical record, along with the brand new financial system. So that investment alone cost about $13 million. On the medical side, we already have state-of-the-art orthopedic program, but we're investing additional $5 million into retrofitting the facility and modernizing our elevators to create even a better program and better access for our patients. We recently have purchased state-of-the-art robotic equipment to complement the program, and now one of the first providers in Illinois of the hip robotic surgery. We continue to enhance our imaging and radiology equipment. We've invested about $500,000 into new MRI and portable imaging equipment, upgrading our telemetry system, expanding our women's health services, implementing outpatient behavioral health program. There's a plan to expand our inpatient geriatric behavioral health program as well over the next 12 months. We'll continue to hire physicians and staff, and the list goes on and on and on. I think our actions speak loudly, and in case of those actions, demonstrate that Weiss is the community hospital for the Uptown. I know that we are all struggling with the COVID pandemic, and unfortunately, while the vaccine is available, it's not accessible to everyone yet. I just wanted to give you a couple of points about services that Weiss provides and the patients that we treat. In the past year, we've seen about 20,000 patients come through our emergency room, 5,000 admissions, and we've done 2,000 surgeries, and over 73% of our patients actually come from the Uptown community. But perhaps the best example of what our role in the community is demonstrated by our response to the COVID pandemic. Since the beginning of the pandemic, Weiss had administered 7,000 COVID tests and treated about 600 COVID patients. I think during the first surge in the winter time, we were one of the first hospitals in the community that got hit pretty hard. We basically had to double our capacity in a matter of weeks. And at one point, at any point, we had about 100 COVID positive patients in the hospital. We're currently open for community testing, and we continue to provide monoclonal antibody infusion to our elderly patients and partnering with the nursing homes to help them curtail the spread of the COVID-19 as well. But with all of that, I wanted to make sure we get an opportunity to thank all of you for your support during COVID by providing almost 10,000 meals to our critical first responders. That truly meant a lot to all of our employees, staff, and physicians. I know that every day Terry would announce who's feeding the hospital next, and there's always enough to go around for everyone and all the shifts. So for that, we're truly, truly grateful. But the crises are not over, and we still have work to do. So our next immediate project is to continue to retrofit some of the facilities at a cost of about $500,000 to build a dedicated medical surgical unit equipped with the state-of-the-art filtration system. We call it the negative pressure rooms. We just purchased additional 9 ventilators to support and treat the pulmonary patients that we know will keep coming, because we know that we'll have COVID here with us for a while. So we'll be able to help all of our community through this pandemic. We're all in this together. A couple of other points worth mentioning is that Weiss continues to be the largest employer in Uptown area. We employ over 700 people, and we're one of the largest taxpayers in the Uptown area as well. So some of you may ask, why is the hospital selling the lot? With all the growth I just described, do we not need the lot for future growth or parking? And the answer is no. As I had mentioned before, we've just renovated our parking garage, which was a $12 million investment, and we have ample parking for current employees, for the community members, and for all of the expansion that we're planning. We also have adequate space in our current hospital facility and adjacent medical office building to accommodate all of the expansion planned for the hospital for the next several years. So we have concluded that the surface lot is a surplus asset, and so we felt it was best to sell the lot and use the proceeds to invest back into the hospital to help us grow all of the programs that I had just described, to provide better services to the community. So to close, I would like to reiterate that we are your community hospital, and I'm here to assure you that there's absolutely no plans to close the hospital. On the contrary, our goal is to grow to provide better care to all of you. Finally, as one of your neighbors and as your community hospital, I hope Weiss can count on your support of the sale of the property, and our goal to continue to be your community hospital for years to come. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Irene. I thought I knew a little bit about the hospital, but that was really informative and good to know. So with that, Alderman or Kylie, I will turn it back to you, and then we are ready to start the Q&A phase of the meeting.
Great, thank you. So anyone who would like to ask a question, on Zoom, you will see when you hover your mouse on the bottom of your screen, a chat button. It both says chat and is an icon of a chat bubble. If you could please type your question there, like I said earlier, I will read the questions in order, and then from the presenters, anyone who wants to hop in can unmute themselves to answer. Okay. Could you be a little more clear about the amount of low-income housing that will be available?
Sure. This is Joe with Lincoln Property Company. And we intend to meet the city ARO ordinance by providing 8 affordable units in the building. So per the ordinance, we need to provide up to 32 units, and we can provide those through 25% on site and 75% fee in lieu. So at this time, we have chose to provide the 8 units, which would satisfy the 25%, and those would be based on the ARO rates, so they're based on the Chicago AMI. And then we calculated based on the remaining 24 units, the paid in lieu fee, which calculated to be just a tad over 3.1 million. So there will be 8 units actually in the building, and those will have to be proportional to the sizes based on the mix of the market rate units.
I can also add that according to the Affordable Requirements Ordinance, on-site units go to people who earn 60% of the area median income. And when there's an in lieu fee, those through the Low-Income Housing Trust Fund, it can be contributed this way, but we're suggesting it be contributed through the Affordable Housing Opportunity Fund. It goes to people who earn between 0 and 30% of the area median income. So rather than focusing on people earning 60%, it does a mix of both, but it's doing a greater emphasis on people who earn between 0 and 30% of the area median income. Approximately 1/3 of people who receive housing subsidies this way have 0 income.
Next question is, I'm wondering about the size of the units.
Yes, our average size between the studio, 1 bedroom and 2 bedroom is 703 square feet. We have 2 bedrooms that are over 1,000 square feet, 1,055 on average. Our studios are a little over 475 square feet on average, and then our 1 bedrooms are a little over 700 square feet per average.
The next question is that the parking garage and the ambulance entrance are adjacent. So what are the plans for this?
So the access by the residents into the building will be from Clarendon. And so we've done everything to try to eliminate any conflicts between ambulance and the residents' access. And then the loading dock into the building would be utilized off of the alleyway, if you will, or the easement that is adjacent to the building to the north. We can schedule a lot of our drop-offs, pickups, things like that, move-ins that would be using the loading space, so that we'll make sure that we're coordinating with the hospital, trying to schedule those during non-peak times for any sort of ambulance use of that area.
In the near term, this parcel is used for some COVID purposes. What will happen to that if the parcel is being redeveloped?
I think I can take that. So I think you're referring to the tent that we currently have. That tent is mobile and will be moved to a different location to continue to provide those services.
At a previous meeting, it was mentioned that the real estate and operations of the hospital were separate entities. So I'm interested in how the land sale money will be reinvested into the hospital.
I think that's a question for me as well. So as you very well know, the hospital has been here for many, many years, but looking at our payer mix, it is what's considered a high Medicaid hospital, which treats about 80% of Medicaid and Medicare population. So that reimbursement is not, while it's adequate enough to cover the costs of the hospital, it's not necessarily adequate to cover the growth of the programs that we're planning and that I have described. So the idea to take, and the goal is to use the proceeds and put it back into the facility to continue to grow. This building is 65 years old, and I can run down the list of improvements that the building needs just by itself without going into the growth of the orthopedic program, the growth of the psychiatric program, the growth of the women's health program, and the gender confirmation program. So all of that requires significant funding, which frankly was not available to the hospital for many, many years under previous owners. So it is important for us to continue to provide services to you, to the community, but it requires significant amount of funding, and that's what these funds are going to be used for.
And this question says it's for the alderman. If I am not mistaken, this plan for small unit-sized apartments seems to be inconsistent with the 46 Ward Master Plan as published. Please explain how this development fits into the plan.
So the 46 Ward Master Plan was created in 2011, and then we revised it in 2013. In 2015, 2016, we had a new Wilson L that was completely restored. When that happened, we found that there are a lot of people with huge college debts graduating from college who were moving into the area that in effect caused a incredible demand on the housing stock. So to meet that demand, we have to build more. And as we build more smaller units to meet this demand of people moving into the area, that will help stabilize the cost of housing in the area. It's the law of supply and demand.
The next question, is there 24 low-income units somewhere else or just giving the money to Sarah Circle?
I can't speak to the specific inventory of the low-income units in the ward, but I can say that we know that this would enable then Sarah Circle to construct affordable units in that project.
This is I'll talk a little bit about affordable housing. One of our challenges, not just in Chicago, but all over the country, the cost to build one unit of affordable housing on average is around $350,000 per unit. It's much more expensive than market rate housing. And there's a lot of different reasons for that I could go on and on about. But so that's why Sarah Circle needs this funding so badly, just because it's very expensive to build.
Do we know what the rental price will be? 1 bed or 2 bed?
We do. They will be, within the market. We obviously cannot be over market or we're not going to lease. So right now we're earmarking for kind of a blended average of about $3.15. What that equates to is about $1,700 for studio, 1 bedroom in the $2,100, $2,200 range, and then a 2 bedroom in the $29,000, $3,000 range.
The next question is for Irene. It says, does Weiss have any other properties that are considered surplus?
Not that I'm aware of.
The next says, I am a community health physician living on Lawrence between Clarendon and Sheridan for the past 14 years. I am very concerned about the changes I have seen here over the years, including gentrification, displacement of low-income people, and the increase in police presence and resultant persecution of people of color and low-income people. 8 affordable units out of 300 is unacceptable, and I'd like to know how you will increase access beyond what you are proposing.
So we're lucky in the 46th Ward, we rank #1 with having the most government affordable housing in the city. And when there are in lieu fees provided, that goes into the low-income housing trust fund. We have more low-income housing trust fund units receiving these rental subsidies than the combined total of 28 other wards. So I agree, we need a lot more affordable housing. The whole city does, but I am also pushing for it. It's been my message that I've given our mayor, Lori Lightfoot. This particular development will actually help provide affordable housing that's badly needed to those who earn under 30% of the area median income, which is extraordinarily difficult to do. On top of that, there's also some other low-income housing buildings that are also happening. It takes a lot of work to make it happen just because it's so expensive to do, but we desperately need it. One of the reasons why this area has become so popular and people, I mean, there's many wards that are losing population. The 46th ward is one of the few wards that is actually gaining. And that's because this area has become so much safer. I've done a lot of work with the Cook County State's Attorney's Office and local businesses and CPD to address crime. And when now our crime rate, especially violent crime, is at an all-time low. It's the lowest it's ever been since we've started recording violent crime. And with that, this area has become more popular. And so that's what we face. We became a victim of our own success. We made this area attractive. So that means that we have to be more committed to making sure we get more housing for people who earn very, very little. And this will help us do that.
Why are more than 80% of the units planned as studio or one-bedroom units, which are essentially unsuitable for families with children to occupy?
We looked at, go ahead, Alderman, I'm sorry.
Well, we covered some of that. Some of that, there is a huge demand for these smaller units. And to address that demand, when that demand is high, rents go up. So to stabilize rents in the area, we want to increase the supply, and that will help stabilize it. But go on.
I was also going to mention that in looking at the housing stock throughout the 46th ward, there is a diverse housing stock. And so we do think that there are options for families of one all the way up to, families of 4 and 5 and 6. So we looked at the entire, the housing stock in the market and looked at what was in demand for the market. And we do feel very strongly that the mix is appropriate.
What is the evidence that these units will be rented? There have been many new developments in Uptown. Are those units fully rented? Knowing that there is an immense need to house people in Uptown, why not provide the community with more low-income housing?
Well, again, I can speak to the market rate units, and what we have seen is most of the new developments are in the 80 to 90% occupied range. And I also want to emphasize that we intend to build an Uptown building. And what I mean by that is we don't want to do micro units, and we don't want a building that feels like it's, in a ward up north that may be, Uptown or in kind of the Gold Coast area. So we want this building to fit into the neighborhood. We do think that these units will be highly desirable, and we do see a strong demand for all of the new markets or all of the new units that have come onto the market, and the fact that the buildings are maintaining nearly close to stabilized rates, although some of them have only been open for maybe a year to a year and a half.
There are about 25 vacant units currently listed in the Covington at Wilson and Clarendon, as well as about 50 at 811 Uptown at Clarendon and Montrose. 350 additional market rate units are planned and approved within 1 to 2 blocks, in addition to more units under construction in other parts of Uptown, totaling around 1,000 units approved or currently under construction. What will differentiate the offerings of this building? How do you plan to attract renters versus your local competition?
So part of what I've focused on is to stabilize rents. And this again goes back to the law of supply and demand. By having more vacant units, you're actually helping to bring down the rents. That's what we want to do. And so building more is actually helping us make this area more affordable. And then maybe what will differentiate the offerings of this
Sure.
building?
You know, I think what will differentiate this building is its location. We do think it has a premier location. We have tried to respect the park on both the east and to the south. So we think that will certainly have an attractiveness. We do want to have state-of-the-art smart technology. We will be implementing some COVID-sensitive design features. So we just think that given the popularity of the Uptown, and again, we're looking to serve people that are already aware of Uptown, they know of Uptown, and so the unit mix helps them be able to afford a unit that maybe they're not interested in a micro unit because it's too small. So again, we're very comfortable with our mix. We're very comfortable with the overall housing stock in the ward and kind of how we position this building.
Why are we not building housing for the people who are already here? We have people living under the viaduct. I don't understand how building luxury rental apartments to cater to student loan burdened persons who don't yet live in the area helps the block. $1,700 for a studio doesn't help those people or a student loan burdened recent grad. How can we address this?
Well, a couple of different things. First off, we are helping those people who don't have any income by having the funding help with Sarah Circle, something that is desperately needed. The other issue that we have to grapple with is Uptown now has become very, very attractive because it's become extraordinarily safe. There are people who are now moving here who would never have considered moving here ever 10 years ago when crime was much, much higher on the intersection of Wilson and Broadway. That area right there, it exceeded 98% of the high crime throughout the city, especially with drug dealing, was right in that area. Now it has drastically improved. And with that, people are moving in. And as cities, develop, you cannot stop people from wanting to move here. We are experiencing the results of our success.
How will this development affect the property values and property taxes of local condo owners?
You know, our assumption is that it's going to stabilize the property values in the area. We don't see it certainly having a de minimis effect on any of the property values. And I think the more people that come here and the more diverse housing, I think it could in fact increase the value of a condo. Taxes, I really can't speak to the specific taxes of every different product. I do know that this development would contribute about $1.3 million in taxes, and I think that's about an increase of $1.1 million of what is currently providing.
You mentioned doing a traffic study. Are you aware of the city's plan to close the Wilson ramp on off Lakeshore Drive? How do you expect this to impact future residents and the emergency room access, as traffic would very likely increase around the hospital?
I'll answer that.
Okay, Alderman.
Yeah,
Thank you.
CDOT has to do a traffic study, and CDOT is fully aware of that. CDOT actually helped create this study for Lakeshore Drive.
And we are aware, so if that does happen in the future, we are completely willing to accept that and adapt to it. And I can't speak for the hospital, but I'm sure they have been in the loop during those discussions and studies, and they have made contingency plans as well.
I thought that Sarah Circle had enough money already committed to build their building. So how are you able to designate them as a recipient of your contribution to the Low Income Housing Trust Fund?
So in my initial conversation with Kathy Wagner from Sarah Circle, I knew that they needed funds. I knew that their plans to purchase this property right across the street from 4750 North Sheridan was still a dream. And so knowing that they needed funds, I asked Kathy Wagner if this is something that she was open to. And then we had to also work this out with the Department of Housing and the Department of Planning and Development. So there was a lot of back and forth going through all these different departments and Sarah Circle and Lincoln Property to help make this work.
This question's for the Alderman as well. If the 46th ward is already increasing in population, would it not be more prudent to add commercial or mixed-use buildings to support the existing population?
Actually, it makes more sense to, because people are moving in here, it makes more sense to add more housing. The whole idea is to stabilize the rents, and you stabilize the rents by increasing the supply.
I believe this is also for you, Alderman. It says, I heard you say that you value the diversity of Uptown. What you have planned does not support that statement. How do you support the diversity of Uptown?
So I support the diversity of Uptown by doing everything I can to provide more affordable housing. I said before that the Uptown, actually the 46th ward ranks #1 with having the most government affordable housing. And just right down the street, 835 West Wilson will be building a 100% affordable housing unit. Sarah Circle just opened up their new facility half block from my home, which is again 100% affordable. And Sarah Circle wants to do another project, which is again 100% affordable. And if you look at all the existing high rises, many of them are HUD high rises. We've done a lot of work to help maintain that as HUD properties. An example would be the 4500 block of North Clarendon. 4500 North Clarendon is a HUD building that was threatened to be sold. And I worked with Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky to keep it a HUD building, and so that people can continue living there. So it takes a lot of work to continue to make this a very diverse community, but I had that struggle that we made this community so nice that a lot of people want to move here.
The next question says, I agree with building more housing on the spot, but wouldn't owner-occupied housing and low-income housing mixed together in one building serve the community better long-term?
So we have to follow the Affordable Requirements Ordinance. Recently, the Department of Housing and the city's law department said that aldermen cannot make up their rules about the Affordable Requirements Ordinance. We have to follow it to the letter of the law, and I do that. And so we do everything we can to provide creative opportunities to create more affordable housing. But as I said before, affordable housing, especially with government subsidies, is extraordinarily expensive, much more expensive than market rate housing. And so that's the dilemma that we're in. So we're trying the best we can, and we're much more successful than the vast majority of the rest of the wards in the city, but I still want to do more.
What real estate company will run the rental leases and manage the proposed building?
Lincoln Property Company will manage the building all the way from lease up, engineering. So we manage in-house. We have a management group, so they will be handling that part of it.
What are the plans for the first floor spaces?
You know, the first floor will contain a variety of spaces. There'll be amenity spaces. So within those amenity spaces will be a bike room, what we call a bike kitchen. There will be a pet room, so where there'll be a bathing section for the pets, access to the outside. There will be the leasing areas. There will be social rooms that will be designed so that people can go in and work in those social settings and be comfortable with the spacing that's provided. Then there will be some back of the house, if you will, which will be the loading dock area, refuse area, and things like that.
Just a note for the chat, so we get to everyone's questions. I'm going to read the questions, but not statements. And if I missed something as a statement that's actually a question, please just resend it to the bottom. I'm going in order. Can the required open space impact fees be used to purchase the open land at Eastwood and Clarendon to help offset negative impacts on Eastwood by the Lake Condominium Association, where owners will likely experience loss of property value, higher future maintenance costs, and degraded experience of their homes owing to new building to the east blocking views, morning sunshine, ventilation, etc.?
I cannot speak to that specifically. That would be, obviously we are obligated to pay our impact fees per the ordinances, but that is something we can certainly look into.
Yeah, that would have to be run by the Department of Planning Development. Great idea, though.
Okay. How will this development help the many families that are struggling in Uptown?
It will help those people who will be living at Sarah Circle. What we're finding is that many people who benefit from programs like Sarah Circle, they don't qualify to live in HUD housing and they don't qualify to live in CHA housing, because both of those types of housing often do credit and background checks. And so we need housing for people who have a very awful credit history. Some of these people have a history of evictions. They would never in a million years qualify for government affordable housing. That's why Sarah Circle is so important. And it would, again, allow our ward to keep being diverse.
A lot of emphasis is placed on biking from the architect, presumably driven by the developer. Is the building going to be LEED certified?
We will adhere to the city standards. They have sustainability standards, so we'll obviously have to adhere to that. That's the plan at this time.
Weiss is owned by a national for-profit company and investors. Besides a verbal promise of the local CEO of Weiss, is there a written statement from the corporation that 100% of the money from this sale will stay in the community hospital? Are you, as an alderman, able to hold them accountable to that?
That would be something that would have to be worked out with the Department of Planning and Development, but I'm not sure if the Department of Planning and Development has the legal means to require the seller to do exactly what we want them to do with that. I don't think our Constitution allows that, but Weiss Hospital has listed what they want to use those fees for, and I would assume that given all the work that they're doing in their hospital, that they would use every dime of it.
Question for the alderman. I'm wondering your thoughts concerning potential future Parkside high-rises cutting the neighborhood off from the lakefront, as we have seen from the Gold Coast to Uptown, and then again from Edgewater to the city's boundaries.
The Department of Planning and Development actually encourages high rises along the lakefront because the property is so valuable, and it offers great lakefront views. And so actually the DPD would actually discourage low-rise buildings. They want higher ones. That's why you see it.
There will be many trucks and cars delivering to this building daily. Is there any off-street space for delivery trucks and cars to park? An Uber or taxi drop-off zone?
This is Joe Valerio. Let me take this question. First of all, with a residential building like this, the main truck traffic is actually people who move in and move out. And, a building like this generally doesn't have that much turnover. Second of all, we did provide 2 interior loading spaces. We also provided a tarmac outside of the interior loading spaces where additional trucks can come up and park if necessary. Frankly, the daily deliveries to the building are mainly from UPS and FedEx to the package room, and those deliveries usually occur, 1 or 2 times a day, and that's probably the heaviest truck traffic.
To the next question, if Sarah Feinholz could retype the question below. And then, what is being done to minimize the environmental impact as we are in an important ecologically rich area with Montrose Point Bird Sanctuary and endangered species?
Let me,
Well, again, yep, Joe.
yeah, let me take that question. So first, we want to use low reflective glass. One of the big problems with birds hitting buildings is the higher reflective glass that was popular. It's been popular for probably the last 40 years. And we will not be doing that. Second of all, it's not a 100% glass building. It's only about 30% glazed, 30 to 40% glazed, which reduces the problem because you don't have those large areas that reflect the sky, which causes so many of these problems. There's a number of other details that have been developed through research over the last 1 or 2 years that are micro changes to the design that we can use to protect birds from flying into the building. And we'll be looking at all these strategies, and as new strategies are developed during our design phase, we'll try to implement them.
This question is for Irene. Irene, you were just asked about whether there are additional surplus properties that are being considered for sale or development on the Weiss footprint. As you know, elected officials have grave concern about the hospital closing like Westlake did. Your response, quote, "not that I know of," end quote, gives me great pause. Millions of Medicaid dollars are coming to pipeline. A stronger guarantee would be appreciated. Perhaps the alderman can answer whether there are other plans being considered. As you know, there are little restrictions for privately owned hospitals right now, which is how we got here in the first place.
So I can tell you that there is no other surplus assets for sale on Weiss property. So there's no other real estate that is considered surplus at Weiss.
And then,
I can say that hospitals around the country are experiencing an incredible economic crisis right now, and mainly due to COVID. And also the Medicaid reimbursement rate. So I know that a lot of hospitals are asking the state to change their reimbursement rate so that they're not losing funds, so they can keep their hospital open. But the state of Illinois also has its budget crisis as well. So it's everyone is hurting financially.
the next questions for the alderman, along with Sarah Circle, what are the other, how else will this development help families? Please keep in mind that studio apartments will not affect family size unit rental rates.
Again, this goes back to this area has become so attractive to a lot of people who are single, who are moving here in droves, and they're filling up a lot of these smaller apartments. So to meet that demand and to help stabilize the rents, that's why we're focusing. That's why developers are focusing on building more of these studio, one bedroom micro unit apartments. It's to meet this demand because this area's become so popular. I wish we had more families moving in here, and as we have more families coming in here, we can do that too. But right now, the demand is for smaller units.
This is Joe Valerio again. I should add that we see this all the time in various neighborhoods that younger people who have an income will jointly rent 2 and 3 bedroom apartments and share them with other people of their age. And they prefer to live in their own apartment. So when you build those apartments in the neighborhood, those young people are naturally driven to move to those new buildings, leaving the older, larger apartments available for families to rent. And that's the reason why when you increase supply in the right way, you actually free up apartments for families in the neighborhood.
This question is asking to please clarify between who owns the parking lot. Is it a real estate company or the hospital? And then can you please explain how the sales funding will go back into hospital operations?
So the hospital owns the parking garage, the flat lot, and I think I've already talked about all the different programs that will be benefiting from the use of the sales proceeds for the flat lot. I can list them out again if needed.
And then question for the developer. Have you considered or have you completely ruled out first floor commercial?
We did consider it, and in looking at the market, we felt that it would take away from some of the existing retailers. And we think that it would have struggled at this location. So it was important for us that the existing retailers thrive. And it's important for us not to have, a vacant space that distracts from the building, distracts from the community, distracts from the neighborhood.
The next question is asking the alderman to clarify Sarah Circle's involvement in this proposal and in the agreement.
So, I mean, we could certainly have Sarah Circle at the next meeting. I spoke to the Department of Housing a number of times, and we looked at all different ways that we could get funding for Sarah Circle, and there was a lot of different choices. This particular route is, I was told, would be the fastest and easiest route to help Sarah Circle to get the funding they needed. We could try to locate other ways of getting that funding, but the city is having a very difficult time financially right now, and so going this route would be much easier.
This is Ricardo Lopez with DOH. If I may just jump in really quick and add a note to this. I would just say that, it's not our job to stand in support or against any development project. Any project that comes through the city for review, it's treated the same. However, as it relates to the Sarah Circle proposal, our mission at the department is to create affordable housing. This is a public-private partnership opportunity, but I would say that like any other funding source that comes through the city, those require city council approval. The timing will be the same across, regardless of if it's through the ARO, CDBG, TIF, AHOP. It all goes through the same process of underwriting. And so yeah, I just wanted to add that note to clarify a little bit.
Thanks, Ricardo.
And then this is asking for clarification. As of right now, are there no car/Uber/taxi drop-off or loading zone for the 300+ units?
I think we are early concept on this plan. Although we've reviewed it with the Department of Planning and the Alderman's office, there's still a lot of detail work to take place. This is something that we're certainly going to look at. And I feel that between Marine Drive and, off-street opportunities, we should be able to find something, because that would accommodate our residents, but it also would help for any traffic flow in the area. So that is something we'll certainly look at.
And this is another question asking for clarification that would be considered a surplus that you are considering developing, going off of Weiss saying not that I know of in terms of surplus properties. So just another clarification about surplus
again,
properties.
Absolutely. To clarify it, there's not another surplus asset owned by Weiss other than the flat lot.
And then this is listed as a question for the developer. There has been a huge increase in package theft at 811 West Eastwood. It's the building across the street. So what are your management practices to add safety to the area?
It's a very interesting question because right now, package handling is one of the biggest issues we face. We actually implement a very secured package room so that the only people that will have access to that are the people that are delivering the package or the actual resident who is picking up a package. So yes, the building will be secured, although like I mentioned earlier, the building will be a quote unquote uptown building. It will be secured from a pedestrian standpoint as well as from a package standpoint.
And then this is a question about the available parking options. What additional parking options will be available if the hospital and local residents now need to park in the lot, especially considering future event venues? And then this question actually builds on that. It says, has Weiss collected any information about how much available parking there is during the day in the parking garage that Weiss is not selling? Has there been any conversation between the developer and Weiss about congestion that could impact emergency vehicles?
Can I take that one? This is Pat Schultz. The answer is yes, we have done a thorough parking study. Currently, with the new garage at peak usage, there is still almost 600 surplus spaces in the capacity. We also studied what will consist of the 136 spaces in the apartment and the 950 spaces in the garage, and anticipated future growth in the hospital, future growth in the MOB, and in the apartment building. And we still have, at peak occupancy, about 148 surplus spaces in the garage. And that includes usage. Currently, there are 363 residents who park in the garage. And we have anticipated that that would grow to approximately 450. And we still have plenty of space in the garage.
And then this question is, after all approvals, what is the construction schedule, and when do you anticipate this opening?
Sure. We anticipate a 2-year construction schedule. So at this time, we would anticipate starting in early 22, which would put then opening in first quarter of 24.
You know, I do want to add something because I'm hearing a lot of concerns about Weiss possibly not staying. And I will say this, that if Weiss Hospital was seriously thinking about leaving, they would not sell this property. They would sell the entire parcel all at one time. They could get a lot more money than splitting it up. So it would not be prudent for someone to divvy it up and sell it that way when they could make a lot more money as one large parcel.
Another question for Irene about the surplus. This one is specifying not about current surplus properties, but are there any properties that could be changed to then be deemed a surplus property for the sake of developing that property?
No, so the only other properties that Weiss owns is the hospital building, which will remain a hospital, the MOB, which will remain the MOB, and the parking garage, which will remain the parking garage.
And then with Uptown Fitness closing in the immediate area and no local gyms, is this building including a fitness center or an area available to benefit the community and overall health of our ward?
The building will contain a fitness facility. So yes, that will be included.
Another question about the parking is that the lot is great, but a paid lot. This is saying street parking is a premium and many people can't afford the paid lot. So is there other parking options available?
Was that from a public standpoint or from the building?
It doesn't specify. The question is about, I believe it's clarifying about the lot being paid and saying that others can't afford the paid lot. Okay, they clarified from a public standpoint.
I mean, I can only speak to the parking that will be provided for the residents, which is like at a 4.43 ratio or 136 spaces. Those spaces will be for the residents.
Okay. Did you think about the construction noise and the patients who will be at Weiss during the construction noise?
We have thought about that, and we will be working with the Alderman's office to address a construction plan, which would mitigate noise, which will address parking, which will address cleanliness around the site during the construction period.
This question is specified for Weiss. What will happen to the summer farmers market? This is the type of family-centric benefit for the block.
I guess I'm not aware where the summer farmers market is. I don't think it is located at the flat lot.
And this,
But I will say this, I mean, if there's questions about moving the farmer's market, close to the Wilson L would be a perfect place, and it's actually larger and it'd be much more accessible to a lot of the community.
Just to clarify that, the farmer's market closed 6 years ago, and it moved over to Argyle Street during the summers. So it's active, but it's at night in Argyle Street, with the assumption that someday we would have the co-op market at the Wilson L. So we haven't had a farmer's market at Weiss in 6 years.
Thanks, Terry.
You're welcome.
this is asking for clarification about the parking question. There is already community-wide parking shortages on our block, and especially with future event venues in the area and minimal street parking, what additional parking options will be available if all hospital and local residents now need to park in the lot? The current lot where this building is proposed is usually full.
That's a struggle that every city has about parking. But what we're finding is we're an unusual ward in that around half of the residents do not own a car. And we believe that as time goes on in the next 10 years, there'll be a lot fewer people owning cars. I imagine that a child born today will never drive. They'll be in self-driving cars. So it's a struggle, but if we want housing to be affordable, the way to do that is to build that type of housing in areas where there's lots of density. That's what helps keeps the cost of housing down.
Alderman Cappleman, have you or will you be receiving any money from the developer?
So I have a set rule that some aldermen have something similar. Most aldermen do not. If any developer gives me money and then within a few months comes to me and wants to build a they have a development they want to build, I return it, any money that they gave me 6 months before they made the request and 12 months after it is passed through city council. It's goes way beyond what aldermen are required to do, but I insist on it. I also have a process because there's still, some people still have this perception that there's pay to play. I am the only alderman in the city that has a process where I rely on a 46 Ward Zoning Development Committee where they vote on those projects. And in my 9.5 years of being alderman, I've always supported what they wanted because this area is very diverse. And 25% of the residents in the area live in affordable housing. I have a process so that those residents are also part of the zoning process. We want 25% of our membership that represent that group as well. And they all vote on the project. And I've always supported that decision.
Three families in my condo have been unable to find attainable family housing to purchase in the ward despite wanting to stay. I realize Lincoln Property manufactures and maintains rentals. Alderman Cappleman, have any models other than the smaller rental units been considered going forward as part of a comprehensive ward planning, such as co-ops and condos?
There are a number of co-ops that we have. Actually, the Twin Towers you can see in this photo, that's a co-op building. There's one on Grace, and there's one at 4800 block of Winthrop. I've tried working with HUD to get more co-op housing. That was something very popular, and the 46th Ward again is very lucky in that I think we rank #1 with having the most affordable co-op housing in the city. But HUD is not using that model. But it's a model that I really like. But it is a struggle. About 5 to 6% of our housing stock is single family homes, which a lot of families like. Our problem though is that if a single family home in the 46th Ward is oftentimes worth $1 million or more. For a lot of families and people like me, we have to live in buildings that are that have multiple units in them, and that's the way to make it affordable. So it is a struggle to get more families here. What we're finding is a lot of families, as was alluded to before, they'll come here as single people. And then when they start having families, they oftentimes move out so they can have more green space to raise their children. But there is a lot of great families that have remained here, including families living at the 4550 North Clarendon. I think that's one of the largest co-ops in the city, incredibly well run. So I'll keep focusing on that. I think it's a great affordable alternative.
Will you also address vibrations during construction? This can impact large medical equipment like MRIs.
Yeah, that in fact is a great point, and we will study the vibrations, the potential vibrations before and then during construction. We will monitor the vibrations and have contingency plans in place to address anything.
If Weiss is not able to sell the property to a 12-story developer, is Weiss Hospital able to be financially viable? It says it's a question to the former CFO and current CEO. What happens after the money of this sale is used up? What are the long plans of sustainability for the hospital?
Very fair question. So everything that Weiss is currently doing is to ensure it's longstanding in the community. So the programs that we're currently growing will allow Weiss to be viable and profitable for many years to come. But to get there, we need to invest, and these investments are expensive, and that is why we're hoping to use the proceeds of the sale of the flat lot to be able to continue to grow the programs that will make sure that Weiss is here for a very long time. Now, we are financially viable. The only difference is if we don't sell it, it'll take us longer to get there. We won't be able to put the money in right away to improve the building, to improve the facilities, to improve the equipment. Eventually, we will get there because we know the community needs us around. It'll take us longer. What we'd like to do is to be able to procure state-of-the-art equipment, to be able to replace boilers that are 65 years old, to be able to upgrade some of the patient rooms, which will improve patient experience, continue to hire and bring on board physicians and employees to continue to expand our services within the community.
Irene, it's Mary Sheehan. If I could just add, this is an opportunity for the community to partner with Weiss and come back and use our services. If we can together make the hospital sustainable, if as we make these improvements, our community actually turns to Weiss as their hospital of choice.
Question is directed to the alderman. Has there been any public support for this project?
So I created a process to get feedback from the entire ward. It's an unusual process. I don't think any other alderman in the city uses it. So that for any projects that's $10 million or more, it goes before a 30-member zoning committee. And I get feedback from all of them. They vote, and the members of the 46 Ward Zoning Development Committee, they are asked to reach out to the people who answer to them and to get their feedback. So I think it's an incredible way to assess how much public support there is when the 46 Ward Zoning Development Committee finally makes a decision on whether or not to support it.
Is the sale of this lot being advertised to build residential units? Were there other parties interested in the land for other use?
I can only speak to the fact that the process that we went through with the hospital was through a competitive process, so I can only assume that there were other interested parties. But I can't speak to the uses or anything of that sort.
This is Pat Schultz, and I can respond to that. The property was marketed to the entire community of development within the Chicago area. And it was subject to bids only from developers who wanted to build high-rise apartment buildings.
Next question. Please explain how this reduces the rents in the area. I pay $1,500 for a 1,000 square foot 2-bedroom across the street. How is a $1,700 studio keeping rents down?
Again, it goes back to the supply of the law of supply and demand. The more units that are built, it keeps the rents stabilized. If we do not build more units, then the demand goes up. When the demand goes up, rents go up. So we want to stabilize rents.
This is asking to state again the sale price for the property.
I don't believe that's been discussed.
Next question. There are constant ambulances going in and out of a tiny entrance and often honking at vehicles in the way. How will this congestion be alleviated? Where exactly would the large weekly semi-COVID tents and freezer go if that is the hospital surplus area?
Well, again, I can tell you that, we will address all this in a thorough traffic study, but preliminary studies have indicated that the way that the loading area is configured, and again, remember, 90%, probably 95% of our loading vehicles are box trucks. They are not semis. We do not anticipate having any semis participating in our building per se. So again, we think that there's ample room and ample planning available to make sure that there will always be ingress, egress provided. You do have an access to the east and west from the area. So again, as we go through the traffic study, we will make sure that we're addressing these concerns.
The tent that's out in the parking lot is actually 4 tents. And at the present time, we use anywhere from 1 to 2 of the areas. So the beauty of that tent is that we can take it down and put it up wherever we feel that there's adequate space. But at the present time, the full tent is not even utilized at this moment. But we have capacity if we need to.
This question is specified for the alderman. What other block clubs, chambers of commerce, or SSAs will have meetings with the developers?
So if you go to my website, james46.org, and go to the developments, you can even probably do search for the zoning committee, and it will outline all the different groups that will be meeting with the developer to discuss this. We've also are expanding the membership to include some others. One person that will be joining the 46 Ward Zoning Development Committee will be the voice of nonprofits and entertainment. And another expert joining will be a woman who is an expert in affordable housing. Both of these individuals are women of color.
Is the sale of the land finalized or dependent on this zoning change?
The contract is finalized, so we have been under contract with the hospital for some time. And within the contract, it is contingent on the amendment to the PD.
There's often a great deal of flooding along Clarendon and Wilson. What features of the building will address this issue? It will be adding 300 units, each with their own bathrooms, washing machines, etc.
And we'll address that as we get into the details of the engineering, but if there is a current issue, we will certainly not only make sure that we are not adding to the issue, but anything we could do to improve the issue, we will do.
This is Joe Valerio. I should add that since much of Uptown has been built up, the city has now added significant requirements to retain stormwater on site, basically within the building. So we will be complying with those ordinances.
And the Department of Planning and Development will oversee it to make sure that there is compliance.
And Joe, you bring up an interesting point that typically flooding is due to stormwater and not necessarily sanitary. And in fact, this building will have more impervious area than the current parking lot.
Joe, you meant pervious area.
I'm sorry, more pervious area, yes, where water can percolate and drain through. Yes, exactly. I'm sorry.
This is asking about how construction congestion, so during the construction process, will affect the ambulances that are coming and leaving the hospital.
Again, as we go through the process, we will develop a detailed construction logistics plan. Obviously, we'll be working very closely with the hospital as well as the alderman's office so that we're addressing any concerns by the hospital and with the neighbors. But again, I think the fact that we have the parking structure where hopefully our construction people can park, keeping them off the street. And then I think given the ample space around the building that we will be able to have a logistic plan that addresses that.
And then this looks like one of the last two. Is the flat lot and the hospital owned by the same entity?
Yes, it is.
And then the last question I see right now, the parking lot is on a former historic beach. Will there be attention to archaeology and preparations for construction should the development be approved?
We will go through a process that will identify any potential areas of interest, and then if that in fact proves out to be, then we would go through the proper processes and channels to make sure that we're addressing that.
Okay, and that was the last question. Oh, sorry, one more. Specified for the alderman by quote stabilizing rent unquote, do you mean stabilizing at the $1,000 plus per room? Surely adding studios at $1,700 will not keep current rates. Would the developer ever lower their rent roll below $1,700?
So all developers are going to rent at market rate unless it receives some type of a subsidy. So that's nothing that an alderman can have any say on unless the Affordable Requirements Ordinance kicks in. And for this development, the Affordable Requirements Ordinance does kick in, and that's why we looked at the arrangements, especially arrangements that would allow us to get rents for people who earn between 0 and 30% of the area median income. But the fact of the matter is people are moving here in droves, and if they don't rent $1,700 a month apartments, they'll go after the $1,500, the $1,200, and the $1,000 a month apartments. And when they do that, it pushes other people out. So we as we keep building more, again, it will stabilize the rents for the entire area.
And the last question says, what is the current market rate for existing studios within the ward?
You know, the current market rate for studios is in that area. Again, we are going to price our units. The rent in our units will be comparable with the market. Otherwise, we're not going to get them occupied. So as we look at the comparison projects in the area, our rents are going to be in keeping with those comparisons.
And that was the last question that is listed.
So if there's more questions, we'll certainly put this on our website. This YouTube video will also be on the website. And send us your questions and we will answer them and find a way of including those answers on our website as well. We want to be as transparent and upfront as possible. And I also want to thank everyone for their great questions. They were really, really good. Keep them coming.
And again, from our behalf, we'd like to thank LANA and the Alderman's office for hosting tonight. We found it very helpful. We'll take a lot of these questions and go back and review them and address where we can.